The morning mist clung to the Volta River, like ancestral spirits reluctant to return to the other world. 20-year-old Kwame crouched behind a thick palm fronds, his heart pounding like ceremonial drums during festival season. He had come to check his fish traps before the village of Afleo awakened, but what he saw made him forget everything about fishing. Through the golden dawnlight, he witnessed something that would haunt his dreams forever. A young woman more beautiful than any he had seen in all the coastal villages of Ghana. Her skin glowed like polished mahogany in the early sunlight, and her hair flowed past her waist like liquid gold mixed with copper, catching the sunrise and throwing it back in 1,000 dancing reflections. She stood waist-deep in the sacred part of the river, where his grandfather used to say the water spirits dwelled. Her voice rose in song, not in Yu or Twi or any language Kwame recognized, but something older, more primal. The melody flowed like the river itself, sometimes gentle as a mother's lullaby to her newborn, sometimes powerful as thunder during the harmattan season. As she sang, something miraculous happened. The fish gathered around her, swimming in perfect circles, as if dancing to her otherworldly melody. Kwame rubbed his eyes hard, certain he was seeing things. But when he looked again, she was still there, cupping river water in her hands and letting it cascade over her shoulders like liquid diamonds. Then he saw something that made him gasp so loudly he had to clap his hand over his mouth. As the water touched her legs beneath the surface, they shimmered and changed, becoming something that glittered like scales in the morning light. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Human flesh becoming something altogether different, something that belonged to the depths. Kwame stumbled backward, his bare foot snapping a dry palm frond. The sound cracked through the morning silence like a gunshot. The beautiful woman's head turned sharply toward his hiding place, her dark eyes scanning the riverbank with the alertness of a hunted animal. For 3 heartbeats that felt like hours, they stared at each other through the vegetation. Her eyes were not the brown of village girls, but deep blue-green like the ocean during storm season. Kwame felt his knees shake as those otherworldly eyes seemed to look straight through to his soul, reading his thoughts, measuring his character. Then she dove beneath the water, so gracefully it barely created a ripple. Kwame waited, counting his racing heartbeats. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. She didn't surface or air. "Niam," he whispered, making the sign of protection his grandmother had taught him. What kind of person can hold their breath for so long underwater? He crept closer to the river's edge, his calloused feet silent on the damp red earth. The Volta looked normal now, just brown water flowing lazily toward the sea. Even the fish had scattered, if not for the faint scent lingering in the air, something that smelled like night-blooming jasmine and ocean salt. Kwame might have believed he had dreamed it all, but he knew what he had seen. The way her legs had shimmered and changed, the impossible beauty, the voice that seemed to come from another world entirely. His friend Kofi would never believe this story. Kofi, who sold palm wine at a flail market and thought he knew everything about women. Kofi, who always said Kwame spent too much time alone by the river, too much time thinking instead of acting. But what if this secret could change everything? What if this mysterious water woman was the answer to all their problems? Kwame looked toward Afleo village, where the first cooking fires were beginning to send thin streams of smoke into the morning sky. His mother would soon wake and wonder where he had gone to check the empty fish traps. His empty stomach reminded him that the fishing had been poor for weeks now. His younger sister Alma was the brightest student in 3 villages, but they couldn't afford to send her to secondary school in Accra. His mother's diabetes was getting worse, and they needed money for insulin from the clinic in town. What power did this river woman possess? And could that power somehow help his struggling family? For 7 days, Kwame returned to the same spot by the Volta River. Each dawn she appeared like clockwork, emerging from the deepest part of the water as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Each morning, he watched her perform her mystical water rituals and sing her haunting melodies. He learned her patterns carefully. She always came from the deepest channel, where fishermen feared to cast their nets. She would sing for exactly the time it took the sun to clear the coconut palms. Then she would dive again and disappear until the next dawn, leaving only ripples and that mysterious floral scent. But it was her hair that filled Kwame's thoughts during the long, hungry days. Golden copper like ripe palm oil mixed with honey, thick as python coils, and so long it floated around in the water like liquid fire. Sometimes when the light caught it just right, it seemed to glow with its own inner flame. At a flail market, Kwame overheard the women talking about hair extensions from Accra and Kumasi. Those city women pay 2,000 Sadie for good imported hair. Mama Koja was saying as she arranged her dried fish for sale. Real virgin hair from India or Brazil costs even more. The Lebanese and Chinese traders, they export to America and Europe for thousands of dollars. 2,000 Sadies. Kwame's family hadn't seen that much money in 6 months combined. His mother's medication cost 300 Sadies monthly. Alma's school fees would be 1,500 Sadies per term. That night, Kwame tossed restlessly on his mat in their small clay house, unable to find peace. The girl's magnificent hair filled his thoughts like a fever dream. Just a small portion of that magical hair could solve all their problems. She had so much of it, surely she wouldn't miss a little bit. But even as these thoughts circled in his mind like vultures over carrion, a small voice in his heart whispered warnings. His grandmother's stories echoed in his memory. Never take what belongs to the water spirits, my grandson. They always collect their debt with compound interest. Kwame pushed the voice away. Those were just old superstitions meant to keep people afraid and poor. This was about survival, about taking care of his family. He thought of Kofi's strong hands and sharp machete. Kofi, who feared nothing and questioned even less. Kofi, who would help him for the right price. The seed of a terrible plan began to sprout in Kwame's desperate heart. But seeds of greed, once planted in fertile desperation, grow faster than anyone expects. What would happen when Kwame shared his dangerous secret with Kofi? And what price would they pay for disturbing the ancient mysteries of the Volta River? An incredible secret that could make them rich. But at what cost? What would you do if you discovered something magical that could solve all your problems? Have you ever been tempted to take something that didn't belong to you when times were desperate? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Smash that like button if this mysterious river woman has you captivated. And don't forget to subscribe because next chapter reveals a plan that will change 2 lives forever. Hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens when greed meets magic. Kofi's eyes grew wide as palm fronds when Kwame finished telling his story. They sat under the great baobab tree where the village men gathered to drink palm wine and settle disputes about fishing territories. The afternoon sun filtered through the ancient leaves, casting dancing shadows on their concerned faces. "You mean to tell me," Kofi said slowly, his voice dropping to a whisper, "that there's a woman with hair worth more than Chief Tetta's entire compound, and she comes to our river every morning like she's following a timetable?" Kwame nodded, his mouth suddenly dry as harmattan dust. Now that he had spoken the secret aloud, it felt both more real and more dangerous. "But, Kofi, I think she's not a normal person. The way she moves in the water, the way she can breathe underwater for so long." Kofi waved his calloused hand dismissively. Kwame, you and your grandmother's stories. Maybe she's just a very good pearl diver from one of the coastal villages. Maybe she's practiced holding her breath to catch seafood for the market. He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming like a hungry crocodile's. "You said her hair reaches past her waist. Pure golden copper color?" "Even longer," Kwame admitted reluctantly. "And when the sun touches it, it looks like it's made of fire and gold mixed together." "Then we take it," Kofi interrupted, his voice hard with sudden decision. "Tomorrow morning, we take just enough to make us wealthy. She'll never miss a small portion." Kwame felt his stomach clench like a fist around broken glass. But what if she truly is a water spirit? What if we anger the ancestors? What if we stay poor forever because you're afraid of old women's tales? Kofi's voice rose, then dropped again as he remembered where they were. "Kwame, my friend, think clearly. Your mother needs her diabetes medicine. My own father cannot afford to repair our fishing nets before the main season comes. This is our chance to escape poverty." Kofi pulled out his sharp machete, the one he used to harvest palm fruits and clear bush paths. The blade gleamed in the dappled sunlight, filtering through the baobab leaves. We hide in the palm grove. When she comes up to sing, we grab her quickly. I hold her arms. You cut the hair, and we disappear like morning mist. Kwame's hands trembled as he imagined the scene. And if she screams, who will hear her at dawn when everyone is still sleeping? And even if someone comes, we tell them we caught a thief stealing fish from our traps. Kofi's smile was cold as river stone. Trust me, my brother. By next week, we'll be the richest young men in 5 villages. But as they made their desperate plans under the ancient tree, neither Kwame nor Kofi noticed a small blue-green bird perched in the branches above them, listening to every word with eyes that seemed far too intelligent for a forest creature. In the underwater kingdom of Nyamkrom, Princess Akojua's closest friend Efua was already swimming frantically toward the Coral Palace with terrible news. What would happen when the Mermaid Kingdom learned of the humans' plot? In the crystal halls of the underwater palace, King Bosampo of Nyamkrom sat on his throne carved from a single giant conch shell. Bioluminescent jellyfish swam in graceful patterns around the coral columns, their gentle light painting rainbow patterns on the pearl-inlaid walls. The water here was so pure it felt like liquid crystal against the skin. Princess Akojua's dearest friend, Efua, swam desperately through the palace gates, her silver and blue tail flashing as she propelled herself through the sacred waters with panicked urgency. The palace guards tried to intercept her. No one approached the king without proper ceremony. But Efua's message was too critical for protocol. "Your Majesty," she gasped, her gills fluttering with exhaustion from her frantic journey. "Princess Akojua is in terrible danger. The surface dwellers plan to harm her." King Bosampo's ancient eyes, deep blue like the ocean's heart during storms, fixed on the young mermaid. Around his neck hung the sacred cowrie of truth. Legend claimed it could reveal any deception. "Speak quickly, child. What threatens my daughter?" Efua's voice broke with emotion as she explained what her bird messenger had overheard beneath the baobab tree. 2 human men plan to ambush her at sunrise tomorrow. They want to cut her sacred hair and sell it in their surface markets. Tears mixed with the salt water around her face. "Your Majesty, they don't understand what they're planning to do. Without her hair, the princess can never return to us. She'll be trapped in the surface world forever." The king's weathered face darkened like storm clouds gathering over the Atlantic. In mermaid culture, hair was far more than decoration or beauty. It was identity, spiritual power, and the very key to their underwater realm. Only hair blessed by Niam and the ocean ancestors could allow a mermaid to transform and breathe beneath the waves. To steal was the cruelest violation imaginable, worse than theft, worse than murder. It was the destruction of a soul's connection to home. "Why has my daughter been surfacing so frequently?" the king demanded, his voice carrying the authority of centuries. "She knows the ancient laws. Contact with surface dwellers brings nothing but heartbreak and destruction." Efua's eyes dropped to the mother-of-pearl floor. She had kept Akojua a secret for months, covering for her friend's dangerous fascination with the world above. How the princess loved to sing to the sunrise, believing her voice could reach their ancestors through the surface waters. How she felt suffocated by palace walls and dreamed of the vast world beyond the river's depths. Efua had begged her friend countless times to stay safe in the depths, but Akojua's wild, curious heart couldn't be contained by fear or wisdom. "She goes to sing, 'Your Majesty,'" Efua whispered. "She says the surface water carries her voice to the ancestors more clearly than the depths." The king closed his eyes, his heart breaking with the weight of understanding. His daughter's voice was legendary even among their people, a gift that came perhaps once in 1,000 years. But gifts, he knew from bitter experience, often became curses in disguise. "We must warn her immediately," he said, rising from his throne with the fluid grace of his people. "Send the dolphins with all speed. Tell her never to surface again until this danger has passed." But even as he spoke the words, King Bosampo feared they were already too late. Dawn was only a few hours away, and Princess Akojua had never missed a sunrise in her entire life. Her devotion to the morning ritual was as predictable as the tides themselves. Would their warning reach her in time? Or would greed and desperation destroy what took centuries to create? The ancient magic that protected their kingdom had always depended on balance, respect between the surface and the depths. But humans, in their endless hunger for material wealth, were about to shatter that balance forever. The trap is set and the warning is sent, but will it arrive in time? Two desperate friends versus an entire underwater kingdom. Who do you think will win? Have you ever had a friend try to talk you out of a dangerous plan? Tell us about it in the comments. Hit that like button if the suspense is killing you, and subscribe because next chapter reveals the shocking ambush that changes everything. Don't miss the moment when human greed collides with ancient magic. Ring that notification bell now. The morning mist clung to the Volta River like ancestral spirits reluctant to witness what was about to unfold. Kwame crouched behind a palm fronds, Kofi's machete heavy and cold in his sweating palms. His friend lay flat on his belly nearby, muscles coiled like a python ready to strike at unsuspecting prey. "Remember," Kofi whispered, his breath hot against Kwame's ear. "Quick and clean. Grab her, cut the hair, disappear like smoke. No talking, no hesitation." Kwame's heart pounded so violently he was certain it would wake the entire village of Afleo. Every shadow looked like his grandmother's disapproving spirit. Every sound made him jump like a startled grasshopper. But the thought of 2,000 sadies, medicine for his mother, school fee for Alma, kept his trembling hand steady on the blade. The sun began its slow climb over the coconut palms, painting the river in shades of gold and crimson. Right on schedule, bubbles appeared in the deep water, where the current ran strongest. Then she emerged, rising from the depths like a goddess born from the river itself. But this morning, Princess Akoja looked troubled. She glanced around nervously, her otherworldly blue-green eyes scanning the riverbank with unusual caution. Had the dolphin messengers reached her with their frantic warnings? Had they told her about the danger lurking in the palm grove? She began to sing, but her voice carried a note of sadness that made Kwame's chest tighten with unexpected guilt. Her magnificent hair flowed around her like liquid starlight, and for a moment he almost forgot why he was hiding behind the vegetation like a common thief. "Now!" Kofi hissed through gritted teeth. They exploded from their hiding place like wild boars crashing to the forest underbrush. Princess Akoja's song cut off in a gasp of terror as Kofi's strong fisherman's arms closed around her delicate shoulders. She was smaller than Kwame had expected, more fragile, and when she looked up at her with those impossible eyes, he saw something that made his soul freeze with horror. She wasn't afraid for herself. She was heartbroken for them. "Please," she said in perfect Jew, though her voice carried the music of ocean waves and deep currents. "I know why you have come, but you don't understand what you're about to take from me. You don't know what you're destroying." Kofi's grip tightened ruthlessly. Less talking, more cutting, he snapped at Kwame. "Do it before someone comes looking for missing fishermen." With hands shaking like leaves in harmattan wind, Kwame raised a machete to her glorious hair. It felt warm under his fingers, alive with some inner current that pulsed like a heartbeat. Princess Akoja closed her eyes, and a single tear rolled down her bronze cheek, glittering like a fallen star. "Without my hair," she whispered, her voice breaking with devastating sadness, "I can never go home again. I can never see my father, never swim with my sisters in the coral gardens beneath the waves. You're not just taking hair from my head. You're taking my entire world, my identity, my connection to everything I've ever loved." But Kofi pressed harder with his restraining grip, and Kwame, thinking of his sick mother and his brilliant sister's future, began to cut. The golden copper strands fell onto the muddy riverbank like fallen stars, each severed piece seeming to dim the morning light a little more. And with each cut of the blade, Princess Akoja seemed to fade before their eyes, as if her very essence was being stolen away with her sacred hair. What had they done? And what terrible price would they pay for this violation of the ancient laws that govern both worlds? The severed hair lay scattered on the riverbank like spilled liquid fire, more beautiful than anything Kwame had ever seen in his 20 years of life. But as soon as the last strand was cut, something fundamental changed in the world around them. The air grew cold despite the tropical morning warmth. The river water began to churn and bubble as if stirred by invisible, angry hands deep below the surface. Even the birds fell silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath in horror at what had been done. Princess Akoj slumped forward in Kofi's grip, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. Where her magnificent hair once flowed like a river of gold and copper, only rough, uneven stubble remained. She looked smaller now, diminished, like a magnificent bird with clipped wings that would never soar again. "There," Kofi said with grim satisfaction, quickly gathering the golden hair into his cloth fishing bag. "Finished. Now we go to Accra and become wealthy men like we planned." But Kwame couldn't move from where he knelt beside the devastated princess. He stared at her broken, tear-streaked face, at the way she seemed to be fading before his eyes like a flower torn from its roots. Her skin, once glowing bronze, now looked ashen and sickly. Her blue-green eyes had lost their otherworldly light, becoming dull and human. "What have we done?" he whispered, the full weight of their crime finally crushing down on his conscience. Kofi grabbed his arm roughly, his fingers digging in with desperate urgency. "We have done what we needed to survive. Come, before someone discovers what happened here." They left Princess Akoj sitting by the water's edge, her shorn head in her hands, her broken voice humming a lament so heartbreaking that even the insects stopped their morning chorus. As they hurried away through the palm grove, Kwame looked back once and saw her trying desperately to dive beneath the surface, as she always did. But instead of disappearing gracefully into the depths, she floated back up to the surface, gasping and choking like a drowning woman. Without her sacred hair, she could no longer breathe underwater. The connection between her soul and the river realm had been severed as brutally as her hair. She was trapped in the human world now, cut off from everything she had ever known and loved, exiled from her own identity. At the lorry station in Cape Coast, Kofi clutched their bag of golden hair like it contained the secrets of the universe. "The Lebanese traders will pay us a king's ransom for this," he boasted to Kwame as they searched for buyers. "Real virgin hair, unprocessed. This incredible color. We'll be millionaires by sunset." But the first hair trader they approached took one look at their treasure and stepped backward, his face pale with supernatural terror. "Where did you get this?" he demanded in broken English mixed with Twi, his voice shaking with fear. "From a girl in our village." Kofi lied smoothly, his rehearsed story rolling off his tongue. "She cut it to sell for university fees." The Lebanese trader shook his head violently, backing away from their bag as if it contained poisonous serpents. "No, no, no. This hair, it moves by itself. Look closely." He pointed with a trembling finger, and Kwame looked down at their treasure with growing horror. The golden strands in the bag were writhing like living snakes, glowing with an eerie light that hurt to look at directly. The hair pulsed with its own rhythm, as if still connected to the heartbeat of its original owner. "This is cursed hair," the trader shouted, loud enough for half the market to hear. "River spirit hair. Take it away from my shop immediately. I want nothing to do with water devil magic." Word spread to the Cape Coast hair market like wildfire in dry season grass. 2 village boys brought cursed hair that glows and moves like it's alive. One by one, every trader, every buyer, every potential customer refused to even look at their supernatural treasure. As the sun set over the Atlantic Ocean, Kwame and Kofi sat by the harbor with their bag of worthless, writhing hair, finally understanding the terrible truth they had tried so hard to ignore. They had stolen something that was never meant for the human world, something that belonged to realms beyond their understanding. And now they were trapped with a treasure that no one would buy, carrying a curse that no amount of money could ever be worth. But the question that haunted them both as they began the long journey back to Afleo was not how to sell their prize. It was how to return it. And would Princess Akojwa, wherever she was in her exile and transformation, ever be able to forgive them for destroying her entire world? The theft that shocked 2 worlds has backfired spectacularly. Curse hair that no one will buy. Karma works fast, doesn't it? Have you ever gotten something you wanted only to realize it was the worst thing that could have happened? Drop your stories in the comments. Smash that like button if you're feeling the suspense. And subscribe because next chapter reveals what happens when Princess Akojwa faces banishment from her own kingdom. Hit that notification bell. The underwater drama will leave you speechless. Deep beneath the Volta River, in the coral palace of Nyamkrom, the atmosphere crackled with grief and royal fury. Princess Akojwa had finally made her way home, but not in the graceful, flowing manner her people. Instead, she walked painfully along the riverbed, step by agonizing step, since she could no longer swim properly without her sacred hair connecting her to the water's embrace. Her return should have been celebrated with songs of joy and thanksgiving to Niam. Instead, it felt like a funeral procession for everything she had once been. King Bosampo sat on his pearl throne, his ancient face carved with lines of rage, disappointment, and heartbreak that seemed to age him centuries in a single morning. Before him stood his daughter, diminished, shorn, and ashamed. Beside her stood Efua, the loyal friend who had tried desperately to warn them but had arrived too late to prevent the catastrophe. "My daughter," the king's voice rolled to the crystal-clear water like distant thunder from the surface storms. "You have broken the oldest, most sacred law of our people. You surfaced too frequently, made yourself vulnerable to the land dwellers, ignored generations of wisdom." His voice cracked with emotion as he looked at her roughly cut hair. "And now you have brought shame and loss upon our entire kingdom." Princess Akojua lifted her chin, trying to maintain what dignity remained to her even in her devastating defeat. "Father, I only wanted to sing to the sunrise. I believe my voice could reach our ancestors more clearly through the surface waters. I never intended for this terrible thing to happen." "Intention does not undo consequence," King Bosampo replied with the heavy authority of centuries of rule. "The Council of Elders has already convened an emergency session. Their decision is unanimous and final." The king rose from his throne, each movement weighted with the gravity of what he had to pronounce. "Until your hair is fully restored, until every single strand is returned to your head by the very hands that stole it, you are banished from the underwater kingdom of Niamcrom." Gasps of horror echoed through the coral halls like ripples from a thrown stone. Banishment was the cruelest punishment any mermaid could face, worse than death itself, worse than any physical torture. To be cut off from the ocean depths, from family, from the very source of their mystical power and identity. It was unthinkable, unprecedented, devastating beyond measure. Efua swam forward desperately, her silver tail flashing with the urgency of her plea. "Your Majesty, please reconsider. It wasn't Princess Akojua's fault. Those humans deceived her, ambushed her like cowardly hyenas hunting a lone antelope. She was the victim, not the criminal." But King Bosampo's decision carried the weight of law and tradition that stretched back to the beginning of time itself. The law exists to protect us all from exactly this kind of disaster. If we ignore it for royal blood, how can we expect common mere people to follow it? If we make exceptions for love, we make our entire kingdom vulnerable to surface-dweller greed and violence. He looked at his beloved daughter with eyes full of paternal love and necessary sorrow. "I am truly sorry, my precious child. When your hair is made whole again, when those who violated you have made proper restitution, you may return to us with full honor restored. Until then..." He gestured toward the palace gates with a hand that trembled with emotion. Princess Akojua bowed deeply to her father, understanding that his harsh justice came from love and duty, not cruelty. Tears streamed down her face and dissolved into the salt water that surrounded them like liquid diamonds. "I understand, my king. I accept the consequences of my choices. I will find a way to reclaim what was stolen and restore honor to our family name." As she swam slowly toward the surface for what might be the last time in her life, Efua caught her arm with desperate urgency. "Akojua, I'm so sorry. If I had been faster with the warning, if I had convinced you sooner to stay in the depths, if I had..." "You tried to save me," Princess Akojua interrupted gently, her voice still carrying traces of its musical magic despite everything. "You sent warnings, you risked your own safety to help me. True friendship doesn't require perfection. It just requires loyalty and love." She smiled through her tears, though something in her eyes remained guarded and wounded. Trust, once cracked by crisis, takes time to heal completely, even between the dearest of friends. But even as she spoke these words of forgiveness, a seed of terrible doubt took root in Akojua's breaking heart. How had those human fishermen known exactly where to find her every morning? How had they learned about the extraordinary value of her hair? How had they known her patterns so perfectly? Someone had been watching her, studying her habits, learning her vulnerabilities. Someone had passed information to the surface world that made her ambush possible. Could her best friend, desperate to protect her, have somehow... No, she pushed the dark suspicion away like poison from a wound. But once planted, doubts grow in the darkness of uncertainty, and trust once questioned is never quite the same again. What would Princess Akoja do now? Trapped between two worlds, belonging fully to neither, carrying suspicions about the very friend who claimed to love her most. Meanwhile, on the surface, Kwame couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't find peace in any corner of his small world. 4 or 5 days and nights he had tossed on his sleeping mat, while the bag of stolen hair sat in the corner of his family's clay house, glowing softly in the darkness like captured moonbeams with a life of their own. The hair seemed to whisper in languages he didn't understand, sometimes sounding like ocean waves, sometimes like crying voices, sometimes like curses in tongues older than human memory. And always, constantly, he could hear what sounded like distant singing, heartbreakingly beautiful and infinitely sad. His mother noticed his sleepless nights and the hollow, haunted look that had settled in his eyes like permanent shadows. "My son, what troubles your spirit so deeply? You look like a man being punished by his ancestors for some terrible deed." But how could Kwame explain the truth? How could he tell his mother that he had stolen the sacred hair of a water spirit, that every time he closed his eyes he saw Princess Akojua's devastated face, heard her voice saying, "You're taking my entire world?" Kofi, meanwhile, had fallen sick with a fever that no herbal medicine could touch. He spoke nonsense in his delirium, babbling about golden serpents and mermaids, calling his name from the depths of the river. His skin had taken on a greenish tint, as if he was slowly transforming into something that belonged underwater rather than on land. On the 6th night, when Kwame could bear the guilt and supernatural torment no longer, he made a decision that would determine the fate of 3 souls. He grabbed the cursed bag of hair and ran through the darkness toward Kofi's compound, where he found his friend sitting by the dying embers of a cooking fire, shivering despite the tropical warmth. "Kofi," Kwame said with desperate urgency, "we have to return it. All of it. Tonight, before we lose our minds completely or something worse happens to us." Kofi looked up with eyes that seemed to swim with unshed tears and supernatural terror. "I know," he whispered, his voice broken by days of fever and nightmares. "She comes to me in dreams every night. She shows me her father's palace, her sisters weeping for her exile. Kwame, what we took wasn't just hair. It was her key to home, her connection to family, her very soul." They walked to the river in complete silence, carrying their cursed treasure like pallbearers carrying a coffin. The volta was still as polished glass, reflecting the full moon like a silver mirror that showed their guilty faces too clearly. For a long time they sat on the riverbank, afraid to call out, terrified of what might answer their desperate plea. Finally, Kwame found his voice and called across the dark water, "Princess, Princess of the river, we have come to return what we stole. We know we were wrong. Please, forgive us and take back what belongs to you." The water began to ripple in perfect circles, and slowly Princess Akoja emerged from the depths. But she looked nothing like the glorious creature they had first seen weeks ago. Her hair was still roughly shorn, her skin pale and sickly. She moved like an old woman, as if the life force had been drained from her very bones by exile and separation from her true home. "You have returned," she said simply, her voice no longer carrying the music of ocean waves but sounding flat, human, ordinary, and infinitely sadder for the loss. Kwame fell to his knees at the water's edge, tears streaming down his face like the first rains after a long drought. "Forgive us," he pleaded with every fiber of his being. "We were foolish and greedy and desperate. We didn't understand what we were taking from you, what we were destroying." Kofi joined him, placing the bag of glowing hair at her feet, like a sacred offering. "We thought only of money, only of solving our problems. We didn't think of you as a person with feelings, with family, with a world that needed you." Princess Akoja looked down at the hair that had once been her crown, her pride, her very identity and connection to everything she loved. The strands pulsed with faint life, but they seemed dimmer now, disconnected from their source. "Understanding comes too late sometimes," she said with infinite sadness. "But perhaps it is not too late for redemption and healing." She lifted the bag with trembling hands and began the long, uncertain journey toward her father's underwater kingdom, where the hardest test of all awaited her. Would the ancient magic still work? Could stolen hair, freely returned in repentance and sorrow, restore what had been so violently taken away, banished from her own kingdom? And the humans finally understand what they've done. But can stolen hair ever truly be restored? The magic that happens next will give you goosebumps. Have you ever had to make things right after a terrible mistake? Share how you found redemption in the comments below. Smash that like button if you're rooting for Princess Okoju's return home. And subscribe because next chapter reveals a miracle that will restore everything. Hit that notification bell. The underwater magic and final redemption will leave you in tears of joy. The coral palace of Nyamkrom had never witnessed such a moment of tension and desperate hope. Every mermaid, merman, and sea creature in the kingdom held their breath as Princess Okoju knelt before her father's throne, the bag of returned hair clutched in her trembling hands like a prayer made manifest. King Bosampo looked older than his 1,000 years, the weight of his impossible decision etched in every line of his weathered face. The sacred cowrie of truth hung around his neck, glowing softly in the bioluminescent light of the palace halls, ready to reveal whether redemption was possible or some violations were too great to heal. "My daughter," he said quietly, his voice carrying the gravity of ancient laws and paternal love in equal measure. "You have returned what was stolen." But the question that haunts us all remains. Can hair taken by force and greed, even if freely returned in repentance, restore what was lost? Princess Okoju bowed her shorn head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Father, I don't know, but I had to try. For our people, for our kingdom, for the hope that mercy can triumph over judgment." Her voice broke slightly. "And for myself, because I cannot bear to live forever separated from everything I love." The king rose from his throne and descended the pearl steps slowly, each footfall echoing through the vast hall like a heartbeat. Every step represented centuries of tradition, generations of wisdom, and the delicate balance between justice and forgiveness. When he reached his daughter, he gently took the bag from her hands. The golden copper hair spilled out like liquid starlight, still glowing with its inner fire. But now there was something different about it. A warmth that hadn't been there before, a sense of completion and homecoming. The hair that had writhed like angry serpents in the human markets now flowed gently, peacefully, as if it knew it had finally returned where it belonged. King Bosampo lifted the sacred strands with reverent hands, and as he did, the cowrie of truth around his neck began to pulse with brilliant light. "The ancestors are speaking," he murmured in wonder. "They say that true magic lies not in the taking, but in the returning. Not in the stealing, but in the repentance. Not in the power to harm, but in the courage to heal." As he placed the golden copper strands against his daughter's head, something miraculous began to unfold. The hair started to weave itself back onto her scalp, strand by strand, growing and flowing like living light until it was exactly as it had been before, perhaps even more beautiful than before, enriched by the journey through loss and restoration. But the greatest miracle was not in her restored hair. It was in Princess Okoju's eyes. The deep blue-green depths returned, along with the inner light that made her more than human. Her bronze skin glowed with renewed health and mystical power. Her voice, when she spoke, once again carried the music of ocean currents and ancient wisdom. "Father," she whispered, testing her voice and marveling at the return of its magic, "I can feel the connection again. The water calls to me as it did before." King Bosampo embraced his daughter as the palace erupted in celebration that echoed through every coral chamber and crystal hall. Dolphins sang their joy, whales trumpeted their relief, and the very walls of the palace seemed to pulse with happiness and renewed hope. But even in the midst of celebration, Princess Okoju's thoughts turned to the two young fishermen who had returned her treasure. They had made a terrible mistake, driven by desperation and ignorance, but they had also found the courage to make it right. That courage, she realized, was worth more than all the gold in the ocean depths. Later, as the festivities continued throughout the underwater kingdom, Efua approached her restored friend with cautious hope. "Okoju, can you ever forgive me? I should have tried harder to keep you safe. I should have been more insistent in my warnings." Princess Okoju smiled, her restored voice carrying its familiar musical quality. "You tried to save me, dear friend. You sent warnings. You risked everything to protect me. True friendship doesn't require perfection. It just requires loyalty and love." She paused, looking directly into Efua's eyes. "But I must ask you something, and I need complete honesty. How did those fishermen know so much about my habits, my patterns, the value of my hair?" Efua's face fell with shame and regret. I may have spoken too freely with my bird messengers. Sometimes they carry information to both worlds without meaning harm. I was so worried about you that I discussed your surfacing with creatures who travel between realms. I never meant for that knowledge to reach human ears, but it did. Princess Akoja finished gently, and that knowledge made their crime possible. "Yes," Efua whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, my friend. My carelessness contributed to your suffering." Princess Akoja reached out and took her friend's hands. "The important thing is that you helped fix what was broken. Forgiveness heals both the forgiver and the forgiven. We move forward together, wiser but not bitter." Meanwhile, on the surface, Kwame and Kofi knelt by the riverbank, watching the celebration lights dancing beneath the Volta's waters like fallen stars. The curse that had tormented them for days was lifted the moment Princess Akoja's hair was restored. But something more important had changed in both young men: their hearts. "We could have destroyed her completely," Kwame said quietly, his voice filled with the weight of understanding. "For money, for our own problems, we almost took away everything that made her who she was." Kofi nodded, his face serious with newfound wisdom. "But she forgave us anyway, even after what we did to her. That kind of grace, it changes a person." From that day forward, both young men became protectors of the Volta River, warning other villagers about the sacred creatures that live beneath the waters. They found honest work. Kwame as a sustainable fishing guide who taught respect for water spirits. Kofi as a palm wine tapper who told stories about the importance of protecting ancient mysteries. They used their earnings not for quick wealth, but to help their families in sustainable ways. Kwame's mother received proper diabetes treatment, and his sister Alma earned a scholarship to university through her brilliant academic work. Kofi's family repaired their fishing nets and bought a small boat that served their village for generations. Never again were they tempted by the false promise of easy wealth gained through violation of others. Princess Akoja still surfaces sometimes at dawn, but now she sings new songs, melodies of forgiveness and redemption that carry across the water to all who will listen. Her voice reminds everyone who hears it that the greatest treasures cannot be stolen or bought. They must be earned through respect, love, and understanding. And in the villages along the Volta River, parents tell their children the story of the mermaid's hair, teaching them that what we take by force will never truly belong to us, but what we give freely, especially forgiveness, will return us multiplied beyond measure. The river flows on, carrying this wisdom toward the sea, where it joins the eternal song of truth that echoes through all the waters of the world. The final lessons. True wealth comes not from what we can take from others, but from what we can give in the relationships we build through respect and understanding. Greed may promise quick solutions to our problems, but always extract a higher price than we expect to pay, sometimes costing us our very souls. Forgiveness has the miraculous power to restore what seems forever lost, healing both the forgiver and the forgiven in ways that seemed impossible. Sometimes the greatest treasure we can find is learning to see the full humanity and dignity in others, even when they seem different from us. And most importantly, redemption is always possible for those brave enough to face their mistakes, make amends, and choose love over fear. What an incredible journey from greed to grace, from theft to redemption. This story proves that no mistake is too great for forgiveness to heal. Which part touched your heart most? The original crime, the curse that followed, the brave decision to return what was stolen, or the miraculous restoration? Have you ever had to make things right after a terrible mistake? Or maybe someone surprised you with forgiveness when you expected judgment? Share your redemption story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone else who's struggling with guilt or the need to forgive. If this magical tale reminded you that everyone deserves second chances, and that courage to do right can overcome any wrong, smash that like button. Your support helps us share more stories about the transformative power of forgiveness and the magic that happens when we choose love over fear. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss our powerful African stories that prove miracles are possible when we have the courage to change, to grow, and to treat others with the respect and dignity they deserve. Share this story with someone who needs to believe in redemption, second chances, or the healing power of making amends. Sometimes the person who wronged you might be waiting for the courage to apologize, or maybe you're the one who needs to find the strength to forgive. What story should we tell next? Drop your suggestions in the comments. Should we explore more tales of magical consequences, unlikely friendships, or the power of mercy to transform even the hardest hearts? Remember, we all make mistakes, but we also all have the power to choose redemption over regret, healing over hatred, and love over the desire for revenge. The magic is always there, waiting for us to be brave enough to use it. Until next time, this is your reminder that every ending can become a new beginning when we choose wisdom over pride and forgiveness over bitterness. Keep believing in the magic of second chances.